1,000 years ago, a mighty empire marched south. Its banners darkened the sky. Its war drums shook the mountains. Its generals were certain of victory, believing that conquest was the destiny of the strong. But beyond the mist and distant peaks, a smaller nation waited, silent, steadfast, unbroken. When the empire's steel met the southern river, the world ignited. The sky turned crimson, the earth trembled beneath a storm of arrows. Warships burned, shields splintered, and the cry of the unyielding rose louder than thunder itself. Outnumbered 3-1, the warriors of Dai Viet held their ground. From the forests, from the rivers, from the shadows. They turned the land into walls, the water into fire, and their courage into thunder, shattering the pride of an empire. From that river of flame, a legend was carved into history. It was not merely a tale of war, but an eternal song of a small nation that proved faith in unity could make even the mightiest empire bow its head. For centuries, the frontier between Song China and the small southern kingdom of Dai Viet was uneasy, a fragile border drawn by ambition and pride. Trade quarrels, border raids, and years of arrogance from northern governors slowly turned tension into hostility. By 1075, the storm finally broke. Learning that the Song Empire was preparing to invade, General Ly Thuong Kiet, commander of Dai Viet's army, decided to strike first. He led his forces across the border, deep into Chinese territory, capturing Yongzhou, modern Guangxi, destroying 3 major garrisons, and taking thousands of prisoners. It was not conquest, it was a warning, a message to the emperor. Do not invade, but pride runs deeper than reason. To the Song court, the attack was an unbearable insult. A small southern kingdom had dared to spill imperial blood. In 1076, the emperor ordered General Guo Kui and Zhao Ji to lead a massive expedition south, more than 300,000 soldiers, one of the largest armies China had ever sent beyond its borders. Their mission was clear: avenge Yongzhou and erase Dai Viet from the map. In Thang Long, modern Hanoi, panic spread through the royal court. King Li Nantong gathered his council as the empire's armies advanced. Dai Viet could muster barely 100,000 men. Farmers turned soldiers, river sailors, and royal guards. Yet the king placed his faith in one man, Ly Thuong Kiet, the general who had lit the fire and now must face the storm. Ly knew his enemy. The Song were strong, disciplined, and heavily armed, but slow, overconfident, and burdened by long supply lines through mountain and jungle. To meet them head-on was suicide. Instead, Ly would fight with terrain, time, and deception, using the land itself as his greatest weapon. He ordered the northern frontier abandoned, the bridges burned, and the fields emptied. Nothing left for the invaders to seize. Then he withdrew behind the Nhu Nguyet River, today's Cow River north of Hanoi, a broad winding barrier that cut across the invasion route. There he built his masterpiece, walls of wood and earth, trenches, and underwater stakes sharp enough to rip open the hulls of warships. Every bend of the river became a trap. Every ripple concealed death. On the opposite bank, General Guo Kui prepared his own reckoning. He believed numbers would crush all resistance, but Ly Thuong Kiet believed in something else, in patience, cunning, and the will of his people. Thus the stage was set. To the north, an empire burning with vengeance. To the south, a nation standing unbroken. Between them lay the Nhu Nguyet River, its calm waters waiting to ignite with fire, steel, and destiny. By the first months of 1077, the northern sky darkened with the shadow of an empire. From the mountains of Guangxi, the great army of Song China advanced south. 300,000 men, their banners glinting like a moving sea of steel. Their drums shook the valleys, and every village they passed trembled in fear. But beyond the border, General Ly Thuong Kiet was already waiting. He had seen this storm coming long before it broke. Knowing that Dai Viet could never win an open battle, he chose a different path. To let the land itself fight for him, he ordered the entire frontier evacuated, Villages were emptied, bridges burned, crops destroyed. The wells were poisoned, the roads abandoned. What the enemy would find was not a kingdom ready to surrender, but a wasteland designed to starve them. Then Ly withdrew his forces south toward the Nhu Nguyet River. Today's Cao River, a broad winding line of water north of Hanoi. Here he began the work that would forge his legend. He spent weeks studying the river's curves, the tides, and the terrain. Where the current slowed, he ordered hidden stakes to be driven deep beneath the surface, enough to tear through the hull of any ship. Along the southern bank, he raised walls of bamboo and earth, dug trenches and ambush pits, and built watchtowers connected by drums, horns, and fire signals. By the time the work was done, the river was no longer a natural barrier. It was a living fortress, crafted by strategy and faith. Every soldier knew his position. Archers lined the ramparts. Naval units patrolled the bends of the river. Messengers rode between camps carrying orders in the dark, their torches glimmering like stars upon the water. Ly moved among his men, calm and deliberate, reminding them that courage, not numbers, would decide their fate. He told his officers, "They come with the pride of an empire. We will meet them with the heart of a nation." When word arrived that Guo Kui and his vast army had entered the frontier, Ly looked north across the misty river and said quietly, "Let them come. The river will rise before them." The drums fell silent. The night wind carried the scent of smoke from distant lands. The empire was marching, and the river of Dai Viet waited, patient and ready. The storm finally broke. At dawn, the song banners appeared through the northern mist. Endless ranks of soldiers stretching across the horizon. Trumpets blared, drums pounded like thunder, and the air trembled beneath the roar of 300,000 men. Across the river, General Ly Thuong Kiet watched in silence. Behind him stood the warriors of Dai Viet. Only 100,000, but their faces were hard as steel. The moment had come. The first assault began with a rain of arrows so dense it darkened the sun. The song built floating bridges under cover of fire. But as they advanced, the water beneath them erupted. Hidden stakes tore through their rafts. Men screamed, dragged beneath the current, impaled and vanishing into red foam. From the southern bank, Dai Viet archers loosed volley after volley, their arrows whistling like swarms of hornets. Drums thundered, horns bellowed, and the entire river seemed to come alive with death. The song responded with siege towers and catapults, hurling stones and fireballs across the water. The air burned, the river boiled. But every time they reached the shore, Ly Thuong Kiet's men counterattacked. Swords flashing, shields clashing, their war cries echoing across the plain. Bodies fell, shields shattered, the muddy banks turned crimson. By midday, the Song commander Guo Kui ordered a massive push. Thousands of men charged the river, stepping over corpses, climbing over wrecked rafts. But Dai Viet warriors struck from the shadows, canoes darting out from the reeds, setting boats ablaze, blades cutting through ropes and flesh alike. One unit of Tong soldiers made it across, only to be surrounded and cut down in moments. Their blood ran down the sand, staining the river redder still. When night fell, the sky itself seemed aflame. Fires raged on the water, smoke coiled into the stars, but the fighting did not stop. The Song tried again and again, and each time, the river devoured them. Men drowned in armor, horses thrashed, commanders vanished in the chaos. The once proud army of the empire had turned into a tide of panic and screams. From his command post, Ly Thuong Kiet gave no shout of triumph. He simply raised his hand, and the drums of Dai Viet changed rhythm. Slow, heavy, like the heartbeat of the land itself. He looked at the blazing river and said quietly, "The earth has spoken. Let them hear our will." Then as the smoke drifted eastward, thousands of Dai Viet soldiers began to chant, not words of war, but of faith. Their voices rose over the thunder of battle, a song that cut through fear itself. And in that moment, the river, once red with blood, seemed to echo back their cry, a nation's heart refusing to die. For 3 nights, the Song army battered the Nhu Nguyet River without rest. Every dawn began with thunder, the sound of drums, catapults, and death. Every night ended with fire reflected in the blood-red water. The land shook beneath the weight of 300,000 men, but the river held. By the 4th day, frustration turned into madness. General Nhu Nguyet ordered an all-out assault. Dozens of floating bridges were launched at once, covered by volleys of flaming arrows that rained like meteors. The sky burned orange. Smoke curled through the wind. From the southern bank, Ly Thuong Kiet stood unmoving, his crimson command banner whipping in the storm. He raised his hand, and the drums of Dai Viet answered like thunder. Across the water, Song soldiers surged forward, shields locked, shouting battle cries that drowned even the roar of fire. Their engineers pushed siege towers onto the rafts, while war drums pounded faster and faster. But the river struck back. Hidden stakes ripped the bridges apart. Pitch and oil ignited the waves into a wall of flame. Men leapt into the water, only to vanish in smoke and boiling current. The Nhu Nguyet River had become a furnace, yet still they came. Thousands tried to swim across, clinging to shields, planks, even the bodies of the dead. Archers from Dai Viet rained death from the ramparts. Every arrow found a target. One by one, the invaders sank, their armor dragging them beneath the burning surface. Still, the Song commanders refused to retreat. Their pride demanded victory, even if it meant drowning the river with their own men. That night, the wind turned. Smoke rolled southward, covering both armies in shadow. Under its cover, Ly Thuong Kiet unleashed his counterattack. Hundreds of war canoes slipped across the river, each carrying a dozen silent soldiers. Faces streaked with mud and ash. They rode without sound, blades glinting like ghosts. When they reached the northern bank, they struck like lightning. The Song camps erupted in chaos. Tents burned, horses broke free, supplies exploded. Drums thundered in panic as fire spread through the night. From the river came the war cry of Dai Viet, sharp, rising, unrelenting. Ly's men cut through the camp like shadows, slashing through tents, igniting stores of grain and arrows. The sky itself seemed to burn. Nhu Nguyet tried to rally his troops, but confusion had already turned the army into a sea of fleeing men. Commanders shouted orders no one could hear. Banners vanished in the smoke, and through that inferno came the voice of the river, the relentless crash of drums from the southern bank, guiding every strike, every ambush, every scream. By dawn, the Song army was broken. Thousands lay dead along the shore. Hundreds more were trapped between flame and water. The once glorious host of the empire had become a ruin of ashen corpses. On the southern bank, Ly Thuong Kiet lowered his sword. The air reeked of smoke and salt and blood. He whispered, "The river has chosen." The Nhu Nguyet flowed silently again, carrying with it the wreckage of an empire. Helmets, armor, banners drifting away into the dawn. The storm had ended, and from its ashes the name Dai Viet shone brighter than ever before. The battlefield was silent at last. Smoke drifted low across the Nhu Nguyet River, where broken shields and blackened helmets floated among the ashes. The cries of battle had faded, replaced by the whisper of the current, a sound that seemed almost human, like the river itself was breathing again. The Song army was shattered. Tens of thousands lay dead, tens of thousands more scattered and starving in the forests. What had once been a proud imperial host was now a shadow crawling north, haunted by the memory of a river that refused to yield. On the southern bank, General Ly Thuong Kiet stood beneath the dawnlight, his armor scorched, his sword stained black. He had won, but victory felt heavier than steel. The war was not yet over. The remnants of the Song forces, desperate and humiliated, still clung to their foothold beyond the river, hoping for reinforcements that would never come. Ly Thuong Kiet knew the empire would send more, unless he broke their will completely. So one night, as mist rolled over the water, He ordered his soldiers to prepare a final act of defiance. Torches were extinguished. The camp fell into an eerie stillness. Then from the darkness a voice rose. Deep, clear, unwavering. Over the mountains and rivers of the south reigns the Southern Emperor by heaven's will. This destiny is written in the book of heaven. How dare the invaders defy it? The words were recited from hidden shrines along the riverbank, echoing over the water like the voice of a god. The Song soldiers, half asleep and broken by fear, fell to their knees, believing heaven itself had spoken against them. Panic swept through their ranks, and before sunrise they began to retreat. The Battle of Nhu Nguyet was over. The river returned to peace, but the echoes of that chant would live on through centuries. The first song of independence ever spoken for Dai Viet, a vow carried not on parchment, but in blood and wind. Ly Thuong Kiet sheathed his sword and watched the morning sun rise over the calm water. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he whispered to his captains, "Heaven helps those who guard their home." The war had ended, but the river would forever remember the voices that rose in its defense. The war was over, but the scars it left behind ran deep. For months, the fields of the Kao River Valley remained silent, strewn with the wreckage of two empires. The bodies were buried, the fires extinguished, yet the smell of smoke lingered, a reminder of what had been won and what had been lost. When word of defeat reached the Song Emperor, the court fell into chaos. 300,000 men had marched south, less than half returned. Pride, the same force that had started the war, now weighed on China like a curse. No one dared speak the name Nhu Nguyet. The river had become a symbol of humiliation, a whisper the empire wished to forget. But in Thang Long, the capital of Dai Viet, bells rang across the citadel. The people came out from hiding, farmers, monks, mothers, and children, to see their soldiers return. The heroes were ragged, blood-stained, and exhausted, but their eyes burned with quiet pride. They had stood against an empire and survived. At the center of the royal courtyard, King Ly Thuong awaited his general. When Ly Thuong Kiet knelt before him, the king did not speak of glory or revenge. He simply raised the old warrior to his feet and said, "You have defended not only our land, but the soul of our people." Ly Thuong Kiet did not celebrate. He walked among his men, touching the shoulders of those who had lost brothers, speaking softly to the wounded. For him, the victory was not one of conquest. It was survival, a message to the world that Dai Viet was not a name to be erased. In the months that followed, peace returned to the valleys and villages. Fishermen rebuilt their boats. Farmers returned to the fields once drowned in blood. The stakes that had once defended the river were left standing beneath the current, a silent monument to those who never came home. And as the seasons turned, travelers spoke of strange sounds at dusk. Drums in the distance, whispers in the mist. They said the Nhu Nguyet River still carried the voices of its defenders, echoing through the reeds, reminding every passerby that freedom is never given. It is fought for.